you think about a healthy board, what does that mean to you?
Making sure that there is an integrated annual self-reflection and assessment for the board members themselves, establishing term limits for your board, having a very well coordinated and planned onboarding process so that new board members feel well integrated into the board, having strong networking relationships among the board, and absolutely 100%, it should go without saying, passion for the mission and an ability to speak to the impact the organization is having.
Okay, what have you seen work well in terms of keeping board members really engaged over time?
Some of the things that I found worked over the years were making sure that I created opportunities for mission connection, because we did see from time to time somebody who loved the idea of what they thought, like, for example, Girls on the Run was. They loved the girl power part of it, but they didn't absolutely feel immersed in what the mission is, and that's something that you should offer to your board members early on, and then it should continue on through their service. I think opportunities for the board to interact in person is really important for engagement, because we're in a world now, especially since COVID times, right, that everybody does things virtually, especially here in LA. But wherever you are in the country or the world, I think being face to face really creates better engagement opportunities. One of the things we always did that I liked for engagement was making sure we had an annual retreat embedded in our annual schedule, right, in our calendar. And that was not just great because, of course, you should be doing annual planning as a best practice, but also it was an opportunity for team building without calling it team building. And then the last thing I'd say, and this was so personal for me because it gave me such joy, was I do feel like to the extent that your chief executive can create individual one-on-one relationships with each board member, that really helps with engagement as well. I mean, it improves communication. It increases I think the desire and ability for people to want to connect. And I do not think that it mattered that it wasn't about them connecting with me as a person. I think it was about the board feeling valued and having a true connection to the organization. And so that was probably my favorite tool for board engagement.
What's one or a few things that you've learned about bringing in the right board members and also setting them up for success in their first year?
Yeah. So I think, just like I said with healthy boards, I think my starting point is define right. What is the right type of board member? Because you want to be intentional in your search. I feel like we did this really well at Girls on the Run. This is one of the things that I felt like was a real strength of our board. We had an annual board assessment, and that helped us determine what skills already existed in our sitting board members, right? And then that allowed us to identify gaps. And because we had that annual planning retreat that I already mentioned, we have established priorities, so we know what skills we need. Once you know what skills you need, and then you take the time to assess what skills you have, now you can decide what you're searching for. So I think framing board membership around the skill set and attributes you're looking for can definitely help find the right person, right? I think for us, we always looked at the right person too across a couple of other measures, like were they a cultural fit? Was the culture around the board table one that we wanted to preserve? And if so, what did it look like when we added new personalities to that mix? And then secondly, and very much sort of tangential to that, is we always took time to think about how important diversity is in the recruiting process of looking for new board members. And when we defined it, it was diversity across all measures, right? Like we were looking for different backgrounds, ages, skills, race, gender identity, sexual orientation. We really wanted to have, I think, a full picture that represented the communities that we serve. And I would say to any service-oriented nonprofit, you probably want to think about that. Like, who are the communities you're serving? And make sure you have enough voices around the table so that people are represented and that your organization stays on track. Once you've recruited these great people who are the right board members and you're really excited about them, you got the skills you need, don't sort of drop the ball in the orientation process and the onboarding process, because you want those people captured right away. You want them engaged right away. You want them to feel as though they have a voice right away, that they feel
Hmm.
knowledgeable and comfortable to ask questions, but also contribute their perspectives. And I think that can be a challenge. You know, new board members, you probably could speak to this better than I, having
Yeah.
been a new board member at one point. Like, it can be intimidating a little bit, and you always think everybody knows more than you, and that isn't why we're inviting new board members, right? We want to hear the voices of the people we've chosen to sit at the table. So
Yeah.
onboarding, having an actual onboarding process, I think it can't be overstated the importance of that.
Yeah, I agree with that. And I think that we're trying to be really intentional about that this year because we feel like we're bringing in diverse perspectives for a reason, and so we want to make sure that we're creating
Right.
psychological safety and creating the right experience for new board members to integrate and speak up. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about transitions. Board leadership and executive transitions are inevitable. And so I'm curious from your perspective, what should boards be doing now to prepare for those moments?
Yes, I mean, having just gone through that process with you, and going through it with other clients of mine, I will say yes, it is inevitable. Leadership change is inevitable, and the best thing an organization can do is, and the simplest thing they can do is make sure at the very least they have some sort of emergency succession plan. In a perfect world, a transition is planned, right? You might get lucky to have that sort of format, and I think good for you if you're in an organization where that happens. But more often than not, it's a little bit more of a surprise. And so take the time to build at least an emergency succession plan. If you are a mid-sized or larger organization, I'd say go ahead and take the time to do a full succession plan, because you are much more likely to have a pipeline of internal candidates that could step into leadership roles, right? In a smaller shop, that probably isn't so much of an option, but an emergency plan at least lets you know how those gaps are going to be filled, and as you search for your next leader. Um, I would just say too, like, if you can take the time to make sure that when you launch the search, you have a timeline and you have a budget in mind, and just approach the search as a job, right? You want to make sure that you're being intentional in that way as well. And I would say if your search is going to be for your very top leader, do consider what an interim can do for you, because, well, you can speak to this, Kate, because I do think, interims are becoming more popular as solutions to fill these gaps, because otherwise all the work is on the board.
Yeah.
And it really leaves it can tend to leave a lot of holes in how messages get communicated and how the work gets done. So I would just
Yeah.
maybe think about those things.
Okay, great. So, last question from me. What advice would you give an incoming executive director or board chair who inherits a board who they feel may not be healthy or has some development areas?
So it's really common. I mean, I do think this is a common problem, and I'm not picking on boards, but I will say, like, in my experience, um, talking with colleagues, this is a real thing, right? Like, people really just struggle, and I think that executive leadership gets stuck in how to, like, where do you even begin? And one of the things that we maybe suffer from a little bit in the nonprofit sector is we're so desperate for resources, right? We're so desperate for resources that um, we're just taking these boards, even if they aren't really operating to their fullest potential, and if they maybe do have some bad habits that are a little bit unhealthy in terms of how the organization should best function. But I would say, you know, take the time to actually look at this, like, analyze this, understand what you are not happy with about how your board is functioning, identify the specific problems, get as granular as you can, because some of those things might be really small that are easy to fix. Maybe it's just better communication, right? I mean, that I definitely have seen. Um, and then go back to, like, looking at, with very simple research, you can look at board resources all the time and look up these best practices we already talked about right at the onset. Like, look up some of these best practices, and then look at your processes and procedures. Match them up and see, like, are we doing these things, and which ones do we think are probably need to be prioritized to tackle first.